everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to episode 251 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Russell with Ink and Paper Blog, back yet again.
Yeah, we're so excited to have Russell back for our annual celebration of each of our top 10 reads of 2025. We go around, we take turns. We'll ask Russell to be the first, to share his first. And I guess let's just jump right in, right?
Yeah. Well, and we were making fun of Emily before we started, but I'm going to be honest, I'm going to cheat because I have 11 books. I had no way of figuring out which one to eliminate, so I'm going to cheat just right off the bat, so fair square. The first book I just wanted to talk about is actually a book I came too late, but in 2024 was everywhere. And that was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This came out in paperback this year, and Echo was kind enough to send me it. And I don't know if you all have seen the paperback, but it is so beautiful. They have these beautiful edges and everything. And this book just tore my heart out. So, story of three different people. I'm sure you've probably talked about this book. I'm sure that everyone already knows about it. But if you know, I'm a sucker for a story about an old lady. Love it. My main character works in an aquarium. She's in her 70s and she's being sort of talked about. Everyone thinks she should retire. She befriends an octopus that has been locked away in the aquarium for some time, who is trying to escape back to the ocean. And there's another young gentleman, I say young, he's in his 30s, who is looking for family. And they all come together. And it is heart-wrenching and heartwarming and just a hug for the heart when it comes down to all of it. They just announced that Sally Field is going to play the lead in the movie. So all the good reasons. I'm sure everyone knows about it. But late to the game, loved it. If you haven't read it, read it now.
I loved that book, and it's one of my top movies that I cannot wait to see this year. Great choice. That's just a feel-good book, and it's one of those chosen family books.
Yes,
I really like
100%.
those. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm even later to the game. I haven't read it yet, so I have that to look forward to. And the movie.
It's a great audiobook. Great audiobook.
Oh, good to
know. Yeah.
All right, Chris, you're up.
I'm up. Okay. Well, my first book I'll talk about, and I am presenting these in no particular order. The first one is a nonfiction, 80 Days by Matthew Goodman. The subtitle is Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland's History-Making Race Around the World. And this came out in 2013. We've had Matthew Goodman on the podcast, and we both love his writing. And this is one that I found when Emily and I were on a Biblio Adventure up in Vermont, I think it was, or New Hampshire. Now I don't remember. And I found it at a used bookstore. And it's like, oh my God, here's Matthew's book that I've been wanting to read. So it is about the famous around the world race between Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland in 1889. One went east, the other went west. And this is at a time when railroads were just being put in around the world. Steamships were now making travel around the world lightning speed practically compared to the sailing days. And then there was also the telegraph, which made communication almost instantaneous. So Matthew just paints such a great picture of each of these women. They were so different. They had such different backgrounds. They had such different personalities and working styles, yet they were on this similar quest. And I won't reveal who won. And also Matthew talks a little bit after the race of what their lives became, because they're both pretty young when this event happened. There was a lot of life left to live, and sometimes winning can make life harder. So I loved it. It's one of those books I didn't want it to end. I could have kept reading if it was 2,000 pages long, because I just enjoy his writing so much. And these women were fantastic. Again, that's 80 Days by Matthew Goodman.
I, too, don't have mine in any particular order. And the first one on my list is Lone Women by Victor Laval. I want to thank you, Russell, because I don't know if it was last year or the year before, you talked about how sometimes when you're having a hard time getting into books, you start with the audio. Mm-hmm. And I did that with this one. And I've just, in general, I'm having a lot more audiobooks in my life, I find, and doing that hybrid reading that you talk about. Mm-hmm. And also listening to more than one book at a time and reading more than one book at a time, which you've also talked to us about. So this is one where I did listen to the audiobook as well, and the narrator was Janice Abbott Pratt, and she did a great job. This book was published in 2023. I picked it up for our ghost story year, which I tiptoed into with trepidation. And it was a horror Western, so it satisfied the Western square on our bingo card. Takes place in 1915. Adelaide Henry is living in California. She's uprooted because something terrible happens, which I will not spoil. And she moves to Montana, and along for the ride with her is this heavy steamship trunk that people have to lift up for her. And she's always very careful, like, be careful with this trunk. And there's a little bit of a mystery about what's inside of it. It turns out that this really, really heavy thing is a secret, and it's a problem in her life because there's something horrible in the trunk that gets her into a lot of trouble. But what's really interesting about this book is it's also historical in nature because she moves to Montana by herself, but at that time, people could get a piece of property and prove themselves by working the land, and if they did it successfully, could have ownership. So she runs into these other women who are doing the same thing. So it ends up being a scary horror novel, not too much blood and guts, which I don't do at all, with terrific writing and a fascinating story and a glimpse into history that I didn't know about. I really loved it, and I will read something else by him for sure, because this was a new author to me. Lone Women by Victor Laval.
He has a short little novella. I can't remember the name of it, but pick it up.
Okay.
I think you'll like it. Yeah,
okay.
It's really
Thank
good.
You.
So I had a very eclectic reading year because I was in such upheaval. Things wound up on my reading list that I don't think I would have ever read in other years before. And the next book on my list, I never even heard of until I was doom scrolling and watched someone talk about their top 10, and they mentioned this book. And I was like, I'm just going to pick it up. I read it in a day. And that's The Savage Noble Death of Babs Dion by Ron Curry. This takes place in Maine. Going back to my old women, this is about a woman in her 60s who runs like the mafia of old women in this tiny little town in Maine. She's completely in control of the town, the drug trade, and everything. And you find out that when she was young, something horrible happened to her. She was sent away, and she came back and she took over. And it's about her and her family. It's about the opioid epidemic and how it affects these small towns. It's also about the French Canadians that lived in Maine and how they were looked upon and treated differently than other groups. And this little town has no money. No one's really wanting to invest in it. And Babs wants to change that. But then a bigger person from a different organization sends someone to take care of Babs because they want to take over the territory. And it's interesting because this woman is involved in drugs and her daughters are addicts and all this kind of stuff. But you sort of start to see that that is something that a lot of people deal with and have to figure out how to control. And Babs is controlling it in her own way. And she is sassy and she is in charge and she is no nonsense. Someone said it's like The Sopranos if Tony Soprano was a 60-year-old woman who drank wine and smoked cigarettes with her friends. So
I thought it sounds like Weeds. Did you watch the show Weeds?
I did not.
Okay, because it sounds a little bit like that show.
It was just a book that I never should have liked. Characters that I never should have gotten attached to. But I think that is just the opioid epidemic and how it affects so much of America was a very unique spin on that. Interestingly enough, I posted my video on my YouTube channel, and Ron Curry's cousin is a viewer of my channel and was like, oh my God, I'm so glad you put Ronnie's book on your list. It was very cute. So that is The Savage Noble Death of Babs Dion, out from Putnam, and it came out this year.
And if we could just say for listeners that the reason that you had upheaval this year, you're fine. but
Oh,
you
yes.
moved. Some people might not know that, so maybe we should tell people that.
Oh, that's true. Yes, I moved from California to Oregon, and unfortunately, this year was a lot of turmoil in America, which caused a lot of issues with me selling my house and buying a house and everything like that. But we are fine. We are happily settled and doing well. So, no worries.
Yes, the upheaval was mostly that his books were packed. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, next up on my list is a book that is nonfiction and kind of genre bending for nonfiction, which is something you don't hear about a lot. But it is Afterlives on Biography and the Mysteries of the Human Heart. This is by Megan Marshall. Megan Marshall is known as a biographer, and this is her first memoir. She has written Pulitzer Prize winning biographies on Margaret Fuller. Her biography on the Peabody sisters won a lot of awards and was shortlisted for a Pulitzer. She also wrote one on Elizabeth Bishop. And that biography, from what I understand, that's her only book I haven't read yet, did incorporate some of her own experience with Elizabeth Bishop, who was her professor back when Megan Marshall was a young student. So this book, though, is straight up, I would say, memoir, but it's a biographer writing a memoir about biography. So it gets a little, twisty in a fun way, like genre bending can. Megan wrote this. She started writing this during the pandemic. It was around the time when her partner died. So she was living alone. It was during the pandemic, and she kind of kicks off the book talking about that, but it really weaves in different essays from different times in her life and different projects that she had been working on or different places she'd been living. Like she was in Japan for a semester, and she talks about that and brings in some literary history there. And one of the things that I really admire as a huge fan of the Peabody sisters, which is a fantastic, really dense, big biography, but so rewarding to read, is that Megan talks about some of the afterlives. So it's not just her partner's afterlife and her life after writing biographies, it's the afterlives of some of her subjects and also some of her subjects' physical objects. And one of the fun things that I really enjoyed learning about was there was a famous desk that the Peabody sisters had where some of their writing was written on. And in a roundabout way, Megan Marshall now owns that writing desk. And she writes, this is a sentence from the book. She says, "I have come full circle, acquiring a thing that represents, may have even produced the words I so cherished in writing the sisters' lives." And it's such a beautiful story of how that came to be. She also talks about another physical object, her father's ice pick. She was from California originally and now is a New Englander. I mean, so many different historical events touched her life as well. Emily read this. We also had Megan Marshall on as a guest this last year. And I don't feel like I'm doing the book justice, but I loved it so much. Again, that's Afterlives by Megan Marshall.
Yeah, and I think one thing that was interesting about it too is it is a memoir and essays, and it's pretty short form. And she said she was practicing that as well, writing in short form, because her biographies are pretty ginormous.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the show notes to the episode where she was featured in an author spotlight. The next book on my list is Leaving by Roxana Robinson. And this was just a book that was so beautifully written. This was one of mine, Chris, that I didn't want to end when I was reading it. And it's about Sarah and Warren, who were lovers back in the day. I think they courted each other in either high school into college years, I think. And then they both went separate ways, got married, had relationships and a family. And then they run into each other at the opera in their 60s and start having a relationship again. And one of them is married and one of them is no longer married. But the story really becomes about what it means when you're in your 60s and you get into an affair with somebody and how it affects your family, namely your children and your grandchildren, and the aesthetics of relationships and what you want out of it and what you do even when you're 60, when you maybe don't want the same, you discover you don't necessarily want the same things. And her writing was just beautiful. I had never read anything by Roxana Robinson. She has a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe that was on my TBR last year, and I didn't get to it, but I'm hoping to get to it this year. Again, that was called Leaving by Roxana Robinson. And it reminded me a lot of the Kent Harif book. I can't think of the name of it right now.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it was made into a movie with Jane
Mhm.
Fonda. It reminded me a lot of that book. Very similar, but different issues arise.
I like that. Just put that on my get that book list, Russell.
Yes, we grow each other's TBRs during this.
So I will actually have a nonfiction on my list this year. I don't read much nonfiction, to be honest with you, but every once in a while I do read something, and this is a memoir in nature, and that is A Truce That Is Not Peace by Miriam Taves. Most people will know her from her book Women Talking, which was everywhere for a while. She has written a couple of amazing novels, All My Puny Sorrows, Women Talking, Fright Night, all of them amazing. But this is actually sort of a memoir. It starts with her invitation to an author's panel in Mexico City, where they ask her to write a small essay on why she writes. Why write? Why do you write? And she tries to get some clarification, and they just ask her this question that doesn't sit with her. And so she starts to write, and she starts to write about her sister. Her sister committed suicide, and it turns out her father had also committed suicide, and it sort of runs in the family. Miriam has considered it herself, and she starts to reflect really on how her sister and how important her sister was the reason why she became the artist that she is. The panel in Mexico City hates it. They keep rejecting it, saying, this is not what we're asking for. We're not asking, you're just not doing it. But she keeps writing and dealing with the grief. There's times where she talks directly to her sister. There's times where she gives us interactions from her youth and then how her sister played into that. And it just is all about this narrative about how important her sister was to who she became as an artist and a writer. It's short. A lot of the sections are very brief, but she just has such an amazing way with words. And I found it heart-wrenching. She reads the audiobook if you're interested in the audio. So that's A Truce That Is Not Peace by Miriam Taves, out from Bloomsbury here in the US.
I'm trying to remember. Didn't All My Puny Sorrows, it was fiction, but wasn't her sister, like it was about her sister's
Yes,
suicide,
it was
right?
about her
Okay.
sister as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an amazing book. Yeah, I forgot about that book, Russell. Thank you for the reminder.
My next book is Jane Austen's Bookshelf, a rare book collector's quest to find the women writers who shaped a legend. This is by Rebecca Romney. And I love this book so much. Rebecca Romney, as the subtitle says, is a rare book collector and dealer and a Jane Austen fan. And as she explains, a lot of Jane Austen fans are, you're a fan of any writer and they're dead, they're not producing anymore. You eventually start branching out and reading books that they read or, books about them, that kind of thing. And Rebecca starts looking into some of these writers that Jane Austen mentions, her novels or letters, and she starts reading them and is kind of blown away by these women. Each chapter is a different woman writer. She starts off, of course, with Jane Austen. Then there's Frances Burney, Anne Radcliffe, Charlotte Lennox, Hannah More, Charlotte Smith, Elizabeth Inchbald, Hester Lynch, Thrall Piozzi, and Maria Edgeworth. These women, some of them you might hear of in the literary history today, but many of them you don't. They may be a footnote. But at Jane Austen's youth, when she was reading, these were the writers she was reading and who influenced her. And so Rebecca Romney is really on a quest to reinstate them into literary history and get people to read them. They've been dismissed as being just food for Jane Austen, but that Jane Austen was kind of the pinnacle. And, this is kind of like the same thing in history. You have the great man theory of history as opposed to what, quote, regular people were doing at that time. But the great thing about this book is not only just this literary criticism and biography of these women writers, but Romney puts so much of herself in it as well about how she became a reader and how her reading taste changed over the years, about how she collected Jane Austen, about how she collected these women writers that she's writing about. It's just a delightful read. Talking about audiobooks, I read this as an advanced reader copy. And I'm thinking now I want to check out if she reads the audiobook because that could be a really fun way to re-explore that. And I've had it in my mind to read some of these women writers. I've only read, I think, something by Maria Edgeworth. So future Chris imagines herself one day reading a bunch of these novels and other writings that Rebecca Romney discusses in this book. Again, it's Jane Austen's bookshelf.
Yeah, that could be a fun one where you do one of those projects of like, I'm going to read through the books she refers to in that book.
Yeah, there's only one writer that I wouldn't be interested in reading who is a bit of a hardcore fundamentalist type, which I don't think would be my cup of tea, even if putting on a historian's hat.
Yeah.
Story for another day.
The next book on my list is Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks. This is also a memoir. We're memoir heavy today so far. And this is one that I was dropping something off at the library, and there it was on the quick picks that we have at our local library, which means it's a really short checkout time and usually a popular book. And I was like, oh, Geraldine Brooks. Chris had read her People of the Book, and we read March by her during our Summer of Little Women. And so I picked it up because I love a memoir, and I started reading it, and then I had to do a bunch of driving, like a serious, like 8-hour day of driving. So I downloaded the audiobook and listened to it, and she narrates it and does a beautiful job. She's from Australia, so she has a fabulous accent. And it is a memoir about the unexpected death of her husband, author Tony Horowitz, who was a very vibrant man. He was actually out on book tour and literally died on the streets of Washington, D.C. from a heart attack. At the time, she was in the middle of writing her book Horse, which has now been published. She has 2 children. And so the book goes back and forth in time from Memorial Day of 2019, which is the weekend that he died, which is why the book is called Memorial Days, a play on words. And then also forward in time, 3 years, where she has rented a little cottage on the sea in Flinders Island in Australia. And what she talks about in the 2019 chapters is like the actual nuts and bolts of after someone dies, like what she had to do and her children and, literally getting to the hospital to identify his body because she lives on Martha's Vineyard. And it was, still the height of the season, and it was really hard for her to even just get off the island to get to DC. And then in the forward years, 3 years forward, she's talking about how in our country in particular, I think we don't give people time to mourn the death of somebody. You might get a couple days of leave from your job. And, she was self-employed, so it was even harder for her. And she really takes that time on Flinders Island to really start mourning this loss of a man that they had such an amazing marriage. I mean, it's also a love story, just talking about their lovely marriage, and a master class in how to prepare for your partner's death. For example, she didn't even have a credit card. He was a master credit card holder. So he died and all their credit cards got taken down. He was the person on the insurance policy. So she really goes through how to handle that sort of thing. I cannot recommend this enough. It's a great audiobook and a very short read if you want to just read it yourself as well. Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks.
We've also hit a bunch of sad stuff to start.
Yes, I had a lot of grief in my reading this year, I noticed.
Oh,
yeah. And I'm not, we're just 3 books in each. There's a lot, I have a lot more grief in my books.
Well, my next book is a little bit more of on an upbeat path, and that is Kevin Wilson's Run for the Hills. I am a huge Kevin Wilson's fan. I have read, I think, everything he's written. He wrote The Family Thing, which I think was like the first big book for him. And every book he's written after that has been very well received. And this book came from the publisher with the most adorable tote bag. So I love it even more. Who loves a good tote? All of us do, I'm sure. But this is the story going back to something that someone said earlier about found family. Madeline is a young woman who lives on a farm with her mom. Her dad and she were very, very close. And one day her dad just disappeared, just like nowhere. No one knows where he goes. And so she just starts to run the farm with her mom and is just plugging along in life. And a man slightly older than her shows up and says, I'm actually your brother. And your father did the same thing to my mom that he did to your mom and me and disappeared. And my mom has passed away, so I've been searching for my dad and I've come to you. Do you want to go searching for the other siblings I have found? And she gets in a car and they go on a journey and they find out that this is something that the dad has done a number of times. And they meet younger siblings, and they all get in this car together. And all of these people who thought they were only children are now all of a sudden in a car with siblings they never knew they had.
Wow.
And they have to come to terms with why their dad left them. Like, they all have different reasons in their head and they want to blame themselves. They want to blame him, but is it bigger than that? You know what I mean? It's funny. It's endearing. It's Kevin Wilson just can tug your heart and then make you laugh. But it really is just, your family is who you make it. And yeah, so Kevin Wilson's Run for the Hills, highly, highly recommend.
I remember Anne Kingman talking about Family Fang on Books on the Nightstand back in the day.
Yeah. All of his books are so different that's what makes him, I think, so wonderful, is that two books are the same. So
that's what I was going to say. He's one of those writers that's impressive because none of his books are the same. And I was trying to remember the name of the one that had like underpants on fire on the cover.
Yeah, that's I can look it up. I just literally had it in my head. Nothing to See Here.
Yes.
And
there's a scene with that in that book that I've never forgotten, and that's unusual for me because I don't usually retain too much of my reading. He's a great writer.
He is a great writer, and all of his books have a way of touching your heart in just a special way. So
yeah.
Oh. Wow. Well, I was just looking at my stack of index cards for a positive book or one that doesn't. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same thing. I mean, whether you're reading biography or nonfiction or novels, I think we've been going through a hard 10 years in this country. So I will just dive into my next book, which is Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez. This came out from Berkeley this year, or last year, 2025. And it's a really fantastic, inspired by true events novel. It's a story about Nikki, who is a middle-aged woman. She has a teenage daughter. Her mom is still alive. And her grandmother, who is estranged, summons her to the family home in North Carolina. I think Nikki is in D.C. She's a realtor, I believe. And so she comes and she's not really sure what's going on or why. There's problems between the grandmother, the mother. Nikki has her ideas of what the problems were, what the troubles were. And by staying with her grandmother and learning about her ancestors, she discovers this whole historic story that happened on this land, which is when, in post-Civil War days, a group of formerly enslaved Blacks and or people born shortly after the end of the Civil War leave South Carolina during Reconstruction and the beginning of Jim Crow, when things were getting extremely violent and even scarier for Black folks. And they go to North Carolina and they find land to start building homes on. And it's land that's owned by a white woman who's a widow. They eventually buy this land and it becomes Happy Land, is what they call it, their own kingdom. And it's exclusively Black people who work the land, have shops. They're kind of self-contained. So the storyline goes back and forth between Queen Luella, is her name, from kind of like the 1870s, 80s to the early 19 teens is her story and her son's story. And then Nikki finds out that these are her ancestors and the land is being threatened. And this is a story, Emily. I don't know if you remember me talking about this, but you were aware of this whole land situation that when somebody dies, sometimes the next person in line to inherit the land doesn't even know that they have this land that they could be inheriting. So opportunists come in and take the land and, quickly make it their own. So through the historic story and the contemporary story, there's this issue of land and the importance of land and people trying to steal land. And I loved it. It was such a wonderful surprise of a story. I picked this up because my sister-in-law had actually given me another book, another novel about the same group of Black people who settled this land in North Carolina. And I guess there are historic debates about where they actually came from. Some historians thought that they came from further south than South Carolina. There's some librarian action in this novel. And then in the acknowledgments, Perkins Valdez actually thanks the librarian archivist who helped her with her research. It's a delightful, delightful story. Yeah, intergenerational. Great story. What more can I say? I think it would be a really good movie.
From your lips to director's ears.
Right. So again, that was Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez.
I've seen some people say they didn't think that book got enough love.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Chris, is this the first book you've read by her?
It is, I believe. Yes.
So she wrote Wench, which is sort of considered like a modern classic almost. It is phenomenal. And then her book before Happy Land was called Take My Hand, which is also, I know you like that history mixed in with the story and stuff. It's about a terrible, terrible thing that occurred in Alabama in the 60s, but it is like a power punch of a book. So she's a phenomenal writer. So Take My Hand and Wench and Happy Land. You should read them all three.
You know
of them,
what?
everyone.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me about Wench, because that is definitely on my list. And then now the other one, my mom lives in Alabama now, so I'm going to maybe push that one up on my list. Yeah, the next thing I read when I go to Alabama.
Yeah, it tore my heart out. The things we've done in this country to people that are in poverty is just terrifying. So, but a fantastic book.
Yeah, she's just such a wonderful writer.
She is, yeah.
Yeah, and Rhode Island just chose Happy Land as their book of the year, their one book read. So
yeah, I was really happy to see that because I don't think it got enough love at all.
Yeah, great cover too. Well, speaking of intergenerational trauma, my next book is the graphic memoir Feeding Ghosts by Tessa Hulse. This won the Pulitzer Prize in 2025 for memoir. It's her debut book. It took her 10 years to write, and she learned to draw to make it a graphic memoir. It is a history lesson of China. It's about 3 generations of Chinese women, Tessa, her mother, and her grandmother. And her grandmother was a journalist, a very well-known journalist in Shanghai. And during the time of the Communist Revolution, she had to flee. And she went to Hong Kong, and then she wrote a very well-received memoir about her experience as a journalist, and then ended up having a mental breakdown and never recovered from that. So Tessa grew up with this grandmother that what she knew of her was that she was really unwell. And she kind of handled that by going off and leaving the family and being an adventurer and doing a lot of great adventuring. But then after her grandmother died, or maybe when her grandmother got ill before she died, she came back home and started to ask her mom questions. And so it's really about intergenerational trauma and how when people don't understand each other and their histories, either you can go in deep with it or you can choose to flee. And Tessa kind of did both, so as she, I was trying to think of it's not, to me, a coming of age story is more when you're younger, but it was almost like coming into adulthood story is the way I look at it, where she really grew up and understood that to know herself better, it would be helpful to know what happened to these very formative women in her life. This will go down in history as the book I kept out of the library the longest. They almost took my library card from me. I think I renewed it so many times that they were asking me to pay for it. But I took my time because I'm not much of a graphic novel or graphic anything reader. And so I really wanted to look at the pictures and think about the story as I read it. Wonderful book. I cannot recommend this enough. Feeding Ghosts by Tessa Hulse.
Emily, that book is beside my bed right now as we speak. I have tried. The font is so small. I don't.
Oh, interesting.
It's so tiny. It's like I'm like the book is 2 inches from my face.
Maybe that's why it took me so long.
But I have heard nothing but rave reviews. I want to read it so bad, but yeah, I need a magnifying glass, which is admitting I'm at a certain age that I don't want to actually say. So I'm like refusing. But yeah, no, I want to read that one really, really bad. So.
Yeah, you could get one of those page magnifiers.
I know. I feel like I should be too young for that, but I'm not. So
yeah. I found that sometimes they're really good on an e-reader or like an iPad, graphic novels or graphic anything, because the font can be so small. Yeah. I mean, and that is densely packed.
It is.
Yes.
Every page is so dense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, I really sat down with it and read like a couple pages. That was it. I didn't spend more time, and that's why it took me so long.
That's maybe what I need to do. I think that's good advice. So, okay, well, my next book is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. I don't even know really what to talk about this book other than it's just brilliant and you should read it. Main character is a young man trying to sort of figure out what life's going to be. And at the beginning of the book, he is minutes away from jumping off a bridge when my favorite people in the world, an old woman across the way, screams at him and says, "Don't come here, come to my house." And she's from, and I apologize, it's been a while since I read it. She's from some Eastern European country. She is settled in her house. It's rather dilapidated. You find out she is suffering from dementia, and he moves in and becomes her caretaker. And their relationship is funny and tense and amazingly complex, and the way he has to navigate her dementia, her flashbacks to where she came from, what he learns about her and the history of her country during the war, World War II. And then he also connects with his family and reconnects with his family and again finds found family. And there's like some caper in it and stuff. And then it's just really about a fantastic relationship between a young man and an old woman and what they do for each other and how important it is to just find your person sometimes, and you never know who that's going to be. So The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. He's a poet, so his words are like magic and butter on the page, and it's fantastic. So
yes, I hedged my bets on that one and didn't put it on my list. I loved that novel, and it was the first book of his I could really read. I do struggle with his writing a little bit.
It is his most accessible book, I think.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, beautiful words.
Yeah, so for those of you who might be listening to this as your first episode with us or the first time you've heard one of our top 10 episodes, we all kind of hope that somebody else will put certain books on the list so we can keep ours to 10. And like, we know some of the books we've all read. So that's what Emily was talking about when she said she was hedging her bets.
Yeah.
I have another one on my list that I left on my list, but I think Emily and I may have a duplicate.
We'll see. Good thing you're going first.
Yeah, Emily, you get to bring it home, don't you?
Yeah.
Now I know.
Well, it depends. It depends on how much cheating happens.
Well, I'm going to cheat on my next one because it was a tie. It was so hard to decide between The Militia House by John Milas and The Award by Matthew Pearl. I loved both of these. They were both so exciting. The Militia House is one that caught my eye when we were at Bank Square Books in Mystic, Connecticut. We were there for an event and browsing beforehand, and it just caught my eye. This is military horror. It is about a Marine stationed in, I believe, Afghanistan. It's been a while since I read it. And he's in charge of an outpost where the U.S. presence is taking over for the British. And it's a small unit. They're loading and unloading helicopters that are coming in. And this corporal is in charge of this small squad who's doing that work. And he becomes kind of obsessed with this old abandoned barracks that's outside the wire that was abandoned by the Russians in the 80s. And he asks the British about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, we could take you over the wire to go see it." And so they do that. Notably, all the British soldiers stay outside while the Americans go in, and nothing is ever the same. John Milas is a fan of Shirley Jackson, so there were hints of The Haunting of Hill House in here for me and for other readers, I'm sure, who have read both kind of close together maybe. So they do all leave, I think, the barracks. And he does a great job, too, of describing the boredom that can be in the military. Like, the military is all like, hurry up and then wait. Hurry up and then wait, And he captures that really well. And he does eventually go home, back to the States, and he is experiencing PTSD that has to do with this barracks situation. So the horror element is very horror-ish in the classic sense of a haunted building. But then there's also the horror of PTSD. And I just thought it was a brilliant story and such a fast read. And a side note is Milas was a student of Roxane Gay's. He took a workshop with her, and she has praised this novel up one side and down the other. So again, that's The Militia House by John Milas. It came out from Henry Holt and Company in 2023. So it's pretty recent.
So are you going to talk about the Pearl or Matthew Pearl's book?
Matthew Pearl. Okay. Yes, I'm going to cheat and just say the award, it just came out from Harper 2025, December. And thanks again to Hank Philippi Ryan for the recommendation of this when Emily and I ran into her at an event in Boston. It is like a fun literary romp of a thriller on the dark side of human decision making and how awful some people can be when they've achieved literary acclaim. It's about a young man and his fiancée who rent the second floor of this house. And the man below, living with his wife, he's a Nobel winner. He's won a Nobel, a Pulitzer, National Book Award. Like, the guy's won everything. And he is a complete ass. He is just a narcissistic, condescending, putrid man that is so believable at the same time. But yeah, so the young man makes a series of really bad decisions. One of the criticisms I've read is that one of the plot points revolves around only one person knowing something. And I too had that in mind when I was reading, that like this is kind of a weak point, but it didn't matter to me because it was so much fun with all of the literary shenanigans that were going on and the bad decisions that kept coming one after the other, that really didn't matter. And I also wondered, well, could that be having something to do with the fact that I'm not really good at keeping secrets? Like that I would not be able to keep my mouth shut if I found something out? It could be. Again, that one is The Award by Matthew Pearl. And Pearl usually writes historical fiction. He writes a lot of nonfiction as well. But this is his first contemporary thriller. Really
Did he
good.
write a book about Edgar Allan Poe?
Yes, I read his.
I read that one. It was very good.
Yeah. His first one was the Dante Club. And then he has this...
Dante Club. Yes,
yeah.
That's it. Yep. Yeah, that's the one I remember.
And then he had a sequel to that came out, which I haven't read yet, but I think I might do it this summer.
Well, my next book is probably the longest book on my list. Although, I don't know, maybe Tessa Holes was. But Beckeye by Patrick Ryan. This is an epic novel with a cast of characters that I missed when I closed the book, and I still think about them. It's just beautiful storytelling. In the New York Times book review, the author Jess Walter, who wrote the book So Far Gone, see how I just did that? I got to add another book that I thought was going to be on my list. He said in his quote, the quote from his review was, "It's a reminder of the deep pleasure of following a cast of characters over their entire lives through birth, death, marriages, tragedies, and in this case, hard-won reconciliations." And then in my book notebook, when I was looking back, over what I wrote about it, I put 5 million stars. That's what I would give it. I just loved the two boys that are in the book, Tom and Skip. It's called Buckeye because they're in a town called Bonhomie, Ohio, is where it takes place. And there are Buckeye trees there, and they're collecting Buckeyes. And Tom has so many Buckeyes that he starts filling his socks with them. So Skip nicknames him Buckeye. So that's where the name of the novel comes from. And I just thought that Patrick Ryan, and this is my first time reading a Patrick Ryan novel. I know people who read him love him. I think he did such a great job at that issue of when you're in long-term relationships and things go south, exactly what Jess Walters says, that you have to win back people in your lives. And some people do that and some people walk away, and sometimes that's the right choice. And then there also is a woman who can communicate with the beyond, with people who have passed over. So she was a very cool character in the book and also allowed me to put this on our ghost story bingo card because of that. Again, it's Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. I did read this as an advanced reader copy, so I don't know anything about the audiobook, but it could be interesting to see since it's so long to see what the audiobook is like as well.
It's a solid audiobook.
Okay.
I have read that book. I recommend it as well, Emily. I'd love to talk to you about it because I have very strong opinions about it. But I will tell you this. I think it is absolutely worth your time. 100%. It is one of those books where you're following these people and you want to know what happens next. So, yeah. But it's a great audio. So.
Peaked. I want to know your thoughts.
So,
we'll have to do a sidebar.
I know. We'll do a sidebar because I don't want anyone to hear my thoughts and then not pick it up, because I definitely think there are a lot of people that will love the book and they should 100% pick it up. So that's okay. There. So, however, my next book is probably the most polarizing book that's going to be on my list because people love this book or have super big issues with this book. And that's Some Bright Nowhere by Anne Packer.
I'm doing a happy dance because this is actually number 11 on my list. So I don't have to cheat now.
So we met Anne Packer years and years and years ago at Booktopia Santa Cruz for her short story collection. And this book came up, and this is the story of Elliot and his wife Claire. Claire is dying of cancer, and there's no saving her. She's going to die, and she's at the end of her life. And she asks Elliot to go away so she can die with her friends. And the book is told completely from Elliot's point of view and how that decision and that request make him feel, how others interact with Elliot in regards to that decision, from his children, from Claire's friends, from Elliot's friends. Elliot is a very complex and I think beautifully drawn character. Like, the heartache he has about losing this woman he's loved. And their marriage has been, I think it's over 40 years. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, but he really wants to be there. And what I think is people are really torn on Claire's request and what that request means. And what Anne Packer does so brilliantly is she never explains Claire's point of view. And in doing that, I think it allows you to sort of start to think about, well, what would you do with the ones you loved when your time is coming? And we don't understand it. And maybe it's not our place. Like, it's not Elliot's place to understand that request. And he loves her very much. I thought it was so good. There's so many fantastic lines in this book. One of Claire's friends says to Elliot, "You treat her like she's already dead, not like she is actually living the end of her life." And I could not get that idea out of my head. I think that it's such a powerful idea. And I think that's our culture, is like, when people start to go, we treat them like they're dying, not like they're still living those last few days. So I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was so well written. It is also a fantastic audiobook. And she blew me away. And I have not stopped thinking about Elliot and Claire since I've read this book. Like, I think about them once a day, and I think about it, what would I do and how would I take it? And it is Some Bright Nowhere, Anne Packer. I know it's very polarizing, but to me, worth every minute.
Russell, did you watch, because it was an Oprah book, did you watch
Yes.
her interview with Oprah?
Part of it. Part of it. I don't love Oprah as an interviewer.
Hmm.
There, I said it.
Hmm.
I just
Oh,
sometimes I think her ego gets in the way of actually asking important questions. So
really? Do you think that? What about the
Oprah
okay?
does a lot of amazing things for
Yes,
books.
she
No,
does.
no
Yeah,
shade there, but
yeah.
just as an interviewer, she doesn't quite work for me. So
Well, what about like now? Okay, we're really going to throw some shade at Oprah here. Okay, I mean, her now all of her book talks are like sponsored by Starbucks, so she also does like the drink that they're drinking, the special drink. It's very commercial, but and she called Ann Packer. She was on her Peloton bike when she called to tell her that, and I'm like, really, Oprah, you can't get off your bike to call an author.
I think she feels that makes her relatable.
Oh,
Okay,
no, she's a billionaire, and these are all sponsorships.
yeah,
Like, how does
yeah,
Oprah make her money? She's a billionaire.
yeah,
Like, think about it. She's
yeah.
going to have all the heavy hitters on,
Hmm.
her
Yeah.
marketing
Yeah,
agenda.
I do think we all should realize, though, she was not a millionaire. The woman
yeah.
is self-made,
Yeah,
and
100%. Yeah.
a black
You
woman
know
from
what? We could
Houston.
we could go in and talk a lot about Oprah in her early years, which were not as pretty
Yeah.
as when she discovered the angels. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I would just like to say that one thing that really surprised me when because I did watch it, is that people have such hatred towards Claire for making this decision, and even including Oprah. And I was like, whoa, like, and I just feel like if you can't be like dying, like literally on your deathbed and have a request, like when are you allowed to state what you want in your life?
Well, what a
You know?
strong person to be able to say that,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I think from my experience with people I've known who are dying, there is such a pressure to give people what they need,
Hmm.
because it's their last contact with you. And I mean, to be able to say that to your partner of so many years, it's pretty tremendous.
Hmm.
I was just going to say, I do think that we sometimes are so much about give me, give me, give me, that sometimes we forgot that we need to step back and go, what does a person really need from us?
Hmm.
And at the end of our life, we should be giving them whatever they need. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like they don't owe you anything at that point, especially when it's such a painful end. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. No, I thought
okay,
it was
Chris, happy book
brilliant.
only.
Brilliant,
Brilliant.
Happy
brilliant,
book
brilliant.
only. Oh my God.
And well, and the other one other thing I want to say about it is that they live in the New Haven suburb. So there's also a lot of fun close to home stuff for me and Chris in that book. Like they go eat dinner in Middletown, and that's where my daughter lives now. So that part of the book was really fun for me to read as well.
Nice.
Thank you for I don't have to cheat now. Thanks, Russell.
I'm glad I could be helpful.
I'm trying to look for a book, which one to do next. So it's a biography of Oprah. You know?
Notes from Oprah's therapy sessions.
You know what? Hopefully, most of the Oprah stuff gets edited out because I don't know if that's going to go well for any of us.
I don't think Oprah's coming for us, Russell. There's no need to worry.
No, but her fans might.
Maybe I should think twice about what book to talk about next. Anyway, you know what? I'm going to pick a biography that is about Amelia Bloomer. Amelia Bloomer, journalist, suffragist, anti-fashion icon. And this is by Sarah Catterall. And it's by Belt Publishing, came out in 2025. I enjoyed this biography so much. Great cover. And it's pretty thin for a biography. Deeply researched, though, wonderfully researched. And it's one of those biographies that really sticks close to its subject and presents her in a way that, let me back up and say that in her introduction, Catterall talks about how Bloomer is more representative of a 19th century woman than like some of the big names that we think of in the suffragist movement, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And so that by looking at somebody who didn't make her living as an activist, but was involved in different movements, she could be a good model to look at how do people get involved in movements? How are they recruited? Involving people who never thought they'd get involved. How does that happen? And then doing things they never imagined doing. Amelia Bloomer, her name is associated with bloomers, the pants that were fashionable in the mid 19th century for women. They were kind of big and baggy, and Bloomer didn't invent them, but she made her own patterns. She also was the first woman to run her own newspaper in the United States. And so by having this newspaper and putting her own, patterns in there and talking about wearing these for comfort and safety, they became very popular and her name became associated with the Bloomers. But this biography shows so much more of what she did. She was an important speaker. She started off in the temperance movement, was the first cause that was dear to her heart, which was a woman's issue, a family issue in a lot of ways, because quite often it was the men who were drinking to excess, to losing jobs, to being violent in the home. And so by being involved in that movement, women's rights became more of a focus for her. And also emancipation and then suffrage, the right to vote. And so by presenting Bloomer in a way that shows her going through these different stages of her life, she also worked as a postmaster with her husband. She was sworn in as a postmaster. And the interesting thing about that is she had her own office in the post office that had a door that closed where women could come and sit and talk with her. And she had comfortable seating and curtains and literature for women to read. And it was one of the first places that women could go outside of the home to talk with other women, and it made me think of the importance of having these spaces, which are becoming fewer in our own country these days. The library is one of the few places we have to go where you don't have to buy anything to talk and have conversations and share ideas. I'm getting off track a little bit here, but the cool thing, and what I was first starting to talk about with this biography, is that Catterall really sticks close to Bloomer as a subject and shows like what happens when they're at a big national meeting or a regional meeting and somebody starts saying that women shouldn't be allowed to speak, and how the liberal men will just say, well, we're going to break apart, and the conservative men will just leave. And it kind of splits the effort, And Catterall, by talking about how Bloomer is a really good example of, she doesn't say average, but more representative is the word she uses. And she shows her in these different situations. She doesn't lead the reader on to make explicit comparisons to today. She doesn't sensationalize these scenes that are in the biography, like they're actual things that happened. And by not sensationalizing them or telling the reader what to think, like you think the thoughts, and it gave me as a reader anyway, like more confidence and more strength to stand up and say the things that I want to say when they're not a comfortable environment in which to say them, if that makes sense. So in that way, I think it's such a powerful biography. So Bloomer was from New York. They lived in the Midwest for a while. She and her husband settled in Iowa, where she made a lot of inroads there and had great success in organizations. Everything from, women's rights against to sanitation, which was a big issue that Emily and I learned about from the Doctors Blackwell a couple of years ago, how important that was in growing cities. So I'm going on and on about this book. It's a short book, but so powerful, and it has stayed on my mind since reading the first couple pages. I recommend it. Again, it's Amelia Bloomer by Sarah Catterall.
My next book is A Family Matter by Claire Lynch. This is a book I don't think I would have known about, but a publicist sent us information. And then it did end up being chosen by one of the reading, Jenna or Reese or one of them. I'm sorry, I don't know which one. But it's a debut novel. Claire Lynch's first book was actually a memoir about motherhood. And this novel has two timelines, 2022 and 1982. It has great chapter titles, which that's one of my things. I love a book that pulls you into each chapter with a fun title. And it's about Dawn, who's a young mother, and she's married and she's a stay-at-home mom, and she unexpectedly falls in love with a dynamic character, a woman by the name of Hazel. And I believe Hazel was a teacher at the local school. And when it comes out that they're in this relationship together, the book then explores the treatment of lesbian women, particularly in the courts around having children. in England. And it's only 240 pages. It was so beautifully written and compelling. It has a very powerful author's note at the end where she talks about the history of the court system for lesbians in England. It also is one of those books where I don't want to be too spoilery, but because it has the two different timelines, the characters do get to address some of the issues that they faced, as the children are adults. I think that's all I'll say about that. I loved this book so much, and I kind of couldn't believe it was her debut novel because it was so well written and brief. It was like 200 pages or something like that. A Family Matter by Claire Lynch. That story has really stayed with me all year.
Sounds great. Sounds sad yet again.
Yeah, I shed some tears. My book journal said shed a lot of tears on this one.
My next book, it's funny. I think every time I've done this, every other year or so when this author has a book, his book winds up on my top 10 and winds up on this podcast. So the next book on my list is Minor Black Figures by Brandon Taylor, who wrote Real Life, which Emily and I read for book club a while ago. He had a short story collection came out, and then he had another book, and then now this one. I think this one is his best book by far, hands down. I know Brandon Taylor is not for everyone. He's for me. That's what I say to people all the time. He is a very intellectual writer, and his book, I don't need a lot to go on. I just need people to talk and be characters and dive into the world. And his main character is a young Black artist in New York City who takes old French films, takes stills from it, and then paints them with Black characters in those stills. That's the art that he makes. He also works at art restoration company, and it's really just a dissection of art, money, society, and then he meets a man, and this man and him meet at an art exhibit. They are clearly drawn to one another, but you find out quickly that the man has a very religious past. I won't spoil anything. And the decision to now be a gay man is a huge, huge deal for him. And that hangs over everything that's going on. So you just get art, literature, New York, people, relationships, queerness, being Black and queer, being a person. He's so smart in the way he talks about all of that. And he just encourages you to go out and learn stuff and then create your own opinions. I just think he's a brilliant young writer, and I love it. So, Minor Black Figures by Brandon Taylor.
He's doing a lot of literary criticism writing now.
Yeah, Zola, they're publishing a bunch of Zola's books. He read everything that Zola wrote, and he is writing the introductions for the publisher to all the books. So,
wow.
Yeah, he's a brilliant man.
Well, my next book is another nonfiction history, what would you call it? What is that word? Narrative nonfiction. That's the word, Chris. A Fever in the Heartland, the Ku Klux Klan's Plan to Take Over America, and the Woman Who Stopped Them. This is by Timothy Egan. It came out from Viking in 2023. I read it as an audiobook on a road trip from Connecticut to Chicago. And this book is the Heartland, and the title is Indiana, which is where a man named D.C. Stevenson became the head of the KKK there, a very powerful man, a very nasty man. This is in the 1920s when the KKK was experiencing a huge resurgence. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were members of the KKK. They had newspapers. There was one point where they were even talking about buying Valparaiso University in Indiana as their school to basically indoctrinate people into white supremacy. And I was driving through Indiana. I was like, wow, look at their signs for Valparaiso. It was eerie. And I think that enhanced the audiobook experience for me and the overall reading of it. I mean, time just flew by listening to this, and Egan narrates it. So it's usually interesting when an author does their own book, because even if they're maybe not the greatest reader, the emphasis is where it should be. You know what I mean? The woman in the subtitle and the Woman Who Stopped Them. This is my only quibble with the book. The subtitle sets the book up to make it sound like this woman was actually working to bring down the KKK. and that's not the case. Her name was Madge Oberholzer, and unfortunately, she was brutally raped and tortured by Stevenson, and she was eventually dumped at her parents' home while she was still alive, but facing an awful death. But she and her parents she provided written testimony about what happened, and her parents pursued the court case that eventually put Stevenson in jail and ended his reign. And then the KKK, not because Stevenson was out of the picture necessarily, but the KKK was already waning. And Egan speculates a little bit on why that was so. One thing he says is maybe they got done what they set out to do, which was to really curtail immigration in the United States. It's a sad story overall, but it was a very engaging audiobook to listen to. Again, that's A Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan. And I'm including it in this because it was such a stimulating audiobook experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what Memorial Days for me was. Like, I remember specifically where I was when I was listening to it, and I think that does have an impact on books having a lasting memory, that when you're trying to choose your top 10 for the year, part of it is the actual experience of reading it. So my next book is one of our read-alongs. It was our Q3 read-along, The Upstairs House by Julia Fine.
Very cool. Yay.
Yeah, this book has really stuck with me over the year. And it was a ghost story, a psychological thriller, and it's about postpartum depression. And I thought the way that Julia Fine handled that in this novel was just really brilliant. The protagonist, Megan, has had a baby. The baby's in the story. Her husband is kind of like traveling and not really helping her very much. And she believes that the ghost of Margaret Weiss Brown, the famous children's book author, and her partner, Michael Strange, are living in an apartment upstairs in her house. And she actually goes and visits them and has conversations with them. And I think the reading of this book was enhanced because we also did a companion read of The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. That was a reread for me as well, but I read it first and then read The Upstairs House. And one of the brilliant things that Fine did with this book is the character, the protagonist, Megan, is also working on her dissertation that is about this author, Margaret Weiss Brown. And that gives her the opportunity to find words like ghost and haunt, because there are like interstitial parts of the book where she's actually trying to write her dissertation. And the pressures on women and the, experience of postpartum depression, I thought she handled so brilliantly.
Yeah,
the novel.
Postpartum hallucination.
Yeah,
too. I mean, we had a really great conversation with a bunch of listeners on Zoom about this novel, and it was really fascinating. I'm sorry to interrupt your.
No, that's okay. Yeah, and it brought up a lot. There were women in our conversation who were very honest and vulnerable about their own experiences with that. And it had an ambiguous ending. And I love an ambiguous ending. And so the conversation around that was just fantastic. And people had really different opinions about what happened at the end. Mm-hmm. So it really stuck with me. I'm really glad we read it. I know not everybody enjoyed it, but I thought her writing was really beautiful as well. Again, it's called The Upstairs House by Julia Fine. No relation to this Fine.
I love that ending. I think about that ending often.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Again, next year, I promise I'm going to bring a book that's all sunshine and rainbows just to mix it up a little bit.
I know. I'm looking at the rest of mine. I'm like, sorry, I'm not going to help.
The next book on my list is Flashlight by Susan Choi. This was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Susan Choi is an amazing author. If you haven't read Trust Exercise, talk about a wild, twisty ride. But Flashlight is the story of a young girl that she's walking one day on a beach in Korea with her father. And she wakes up. The only thing she has is the flashlight, and her father has disappeared. And no one knows where he is or why he is gone, but they assume he's dead. And it's about what that event does to her as she grows up. She has a very contentious relationship with her mother. Her mother is actually quite ill, but almost like the daughter doesn't believe her mom feels like it's all like just to get attention. And it's about their life afterwards. You follow them for decades, the mom, the daughter, the choices they make. And then later on in the book, we start to find out what happened to dad. And it's a story about how people in Korea were stolen from Korea by another country quite often historically and all of that. I don't want to go too much more into it, but all I will say is you won't see it coming. You won't think at all where the book's going to go. But I will say it took me a minute. The main character, the young girl, is tough to like at first and is really mean to her mom. But then you find out that there's just so much history. You go back in time to when the mom met the father, when he came to America as a professor, and their relationship and the difficulties they had. And it becomes a family saga, but this mystery and what happened to dad is like hanging over everything. As that sort of all works out together, you start to figure out that you didn't really know anything and you better start over and look at it all again.
Did you read it again?
I listened to it again.
Wow.
Flashlight, Susan Choi, highly recommend. It will blow your mind, I promise.
Wow. What time period is that set in?
Oh gosh, I got to remember. So I think the beginning of it is she's 10. I think it's like the 1970s maybe. And then it goes back in time and then forward in time. So it's a lot. It's a big book. It's not it's not like something you'll read in a weekend, but highly recommend it.
All right. Well, I'm going to do one of these cheating things again that Emily trained me on.
I'm getting so much blame and I haven't done any cheating. Well, maybe a little. But.
So 2 young adult novels. I read some wonderful young adult stuff, some kids' books, picture books, I should say. And one, it's not coming out until 2026, is Beth is Dead. Which is now. So listeners, I think January 6th is when it released. Beth is Dead by Katie Barnett. Oh my gosh. I read an advanced digital copy. I love this book so much. The Beth in the Beth is Dead is the Beth from Little Women, Louisa May Alcott's classic. And Barnett takes this sisters from Little Women and puts them in contemporary situation. Beth is dead. Did she have an accident? Was she murdered? You don't know what happens originally. There are scenes with Beth being alive. She's found on New Year's Day. And I just think it is a complete love letter to Little Women, the original story, because Burnett takes such care to represent the sisters' personalities that we know from the original Little Women and puts them in contemporary situations. Same thing with the mom. The mom's a trauma nurse. Well, maybe not the same thing with the mom, but similar. You know, the mom was taking care of people in the neighborhood. The father is kind of absent in a lot of ways. What triggers the whole mystery thriller aspect of this, you would think it's that Beth is dead, but it actually starts earlier when Dad, who is a novelist, he's had 10 really wonderfully acclaimed novels, critically acclaimed books. None of them have been bestsellers. The family is always struggling for money, just like the original family in Little Women. And he writes a bestseller that is off the charts, that is based on his daughters that he calls Little Women. So you find out through different chapters from different sisters' perspectives, the family story. And there's diversity introduced with some of the peripheral characters. It's a really good thriller. So even if you don't know the original Little Women, I think people would dig this as a thriller. It's for older teens, I would think, as well. Meg, the oldest sister, I think she's maybe 20. She's in college. Beth, the youngest, I think was a sophomore in high school. So you have that age range. So probably, mid to later teens, possibly. But the other YA that I couldn't decide with, that I just want to give a big shout out to, is The Belgian Girls by Catherine Atwood. This also came out in 2025. It's a dual timeline historical novel about a young woman in World War One and a young woman in World War Two in Belgium. They are both fighting for their country against, in World War One, the Germans, in World War Two, the German Nazis. And it's actually inspired by a real life Belgian spy in World War One named Gabrielle Petit, who inspired this story. Atwood usually writes nonfiction. This is her first stab at fiction, and I think she did an excellent job. She really presents these two young women as passionate, compassionate women who love their country, who love their fellow citizens, and who harness their anger towards what they love, which is their country and their fellow citizens, as opposed to what they hate, which is the Germans in this case, and I think it's a really good message for younger readers too. So another good book, Belgian Girls by Catherine Atwood and Beth is Dead by Katie Burnett. Two great young adult novels.
Well, my next book is Wreck by Catherine Newman. Last year, her book Sandwich was on my top 10, and Wreck is a continuation. We're back with Rocky and her family. It's a couple years later. They're not on Cape Cod for the summer this time. In Sandwich, it was like a 1-week vacation on Cape Cod. Now they're back home in their family home in Massachusetts. Her father is living with her. And Rocky Faze, she's a bit of a wreck. One of the things I love about Catherine Newman is the titles of her books have the word itself, Sandwich and Wreck both have multiple meanings. In this case, Rocky is having a rough time physically. She has some health challenges that they're having a trouble diagnosing. She is struggling with having adult children and how to manage her relationship with them and with herself. And there's an actual train wreck that takes place. There's an accident, and it doesn't directly impact her family, but it does tangentially impact the family. Catherine Newman is also a food writer. And in this novel, Rocky is a food writer, and she's asked to write an article about how to spatchcock a chicken. Do you guys know what that means? Like when you take all the bones out and make the chicken flat.
What's the word for that?
Spatchcock.
Spatchcock, yeah. You break the breastbone.
Yeah, you take out the main breastbone and then you make it flat, and so you can roast a chicken faster or put it on the grill. And it's very funny. I mean, there's always good humor in her writing, and I really appreciated that part of the novel as well. And I feel like she uses very few words to tell her stories, and I love being in her world for a short time. Wreck by Catherine Newman. I think it's a great standalone, but I would recommend that you read Sandwich first because I thought it was a good introduction to the characters.
So I loved Sandwich and did not know that Wreck was related. So I will be picking that up immediately because I did love Sandwich very, very much. So that's good to hear. My next book is Heart the Lover by Lily King. Lily King has been one of those authors that I've always wanted to read and know that I would probably love and own all of her books and had never read anything. But I follow a couple of bookstagrammers, a couple in real life and a couple of bookstagrammers in New York, and they both had read it and loved it, and so I picked it up. It is technically, I guess, a sequel to her last book, Writers and Lovers, but they are not connected in a way that you have to have read one to enjoy the other. I bawled my eyes out at the end of this book. But this is the story of 3 people in college, a young woman who falls for a man named Sam, and Sam is very, very conservative, and issues arise in their relationship that cause them to break up. And she later becomes involved with Sam's best friend and housemate, Yash. Well, when Sam finds out, let's just say he's not happy. Yash is not allowed to interact with both of them at the same time. It creates this very difficult situation. Yash and she run off to Paris. They're going to have this life together. One day she is supposed to meet him in New York City, and he doesn't show up. And then years and years later, he reaches out and comes by, and it turns out that he needs her in her life for another reason. And Yash is never married. He's never settled down. He's always loved her, and you find out that there were good reasons for him in his head, and he has regretted that decision his whole life. And now things are happening, and It is so good. It is so good. I would say that if you like Catherine Newman or like Elizabeth Strout, people who tell whole stories with few words, paint pictures with very short sentences. Lily King is sort of that vibe to me. I just thought the book was so beautifully written and brilliant and everything you need to do when you just need to cry.
All right, and I'm going to grab it because I thought, I'm such an upholder. I did think it was the sequel to Writers and Lovers, so I was like, I need to read that first, so I don't need to. Good to know.
No,
Okay.
and I'm refusing to buy it because I own it and it's in a box. So I'm trying really hard not to have duplicate copies of things
Yes,
that I know I own. But
I think I read her book Euphoria. I think that's the
yes,
only one I've read of
very
hers.
different than
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
Yes.
because that was about is it fictionalized of Margaret Mead, right? Or
Yes.
something. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, yeah. She's a great writer. So thank you. I'm glad to know you liked that one. That's exciting. I'm going to read it.
All right. Well, speaking of great writers, I always have to have a classic in my top 10 list. And last year I read 3 books by Edith Wharton. Her ghost stories, A Sun at the Front, and then Old New York. And Old New York is definitely on my top 10. It's 4 different novellas, all about, as the title says, Old New York. She's writing about the 1840s, 1850s, 60s, and then 70s. And they were each of them just very, Edith comes from Old New York. And that's where she was born and raised and heard all of the family stories. I'm currently actually reading her autobiography called A Backward Glance, where she refers back to Old New York and to the Dutch side of the family and the different personalities of the different families based on where they came from and what businesses they're in and things like that. So it brought back Old New York into my mind. And so when I was trying to decide which of the Whartons to choose, I went with the Old New York. Another reason is that she talks so much about when Americans first started collecting art, the families that had excess wealth using art as a way to invest their money. And it made me think about Chasing Beauty by Natalie Dykstra, which is a biography that Emily and I read this year about a really great American collector of art, Isabella Stewart Gardner.
We saw what you did there. We saw.
Well,
I was just about to say,
yeah.
I think in this little section,
Yeah.
Chris has snuck in 4 separate books.
I thought it was 5.
5. I think you're right, Emily. 5 books.
We see you.
Yeah, well, I learned fast. I learned fast from the best. But I just really love these different stories. They didn't all hold my attention for the same reasons, but they were each really fascinating for different reasons. Let's just say that, from the art collecting to mentioning like Edgar Allan Poe's wife in one case, and very enjoyable. So again, that's Old New York by Edith Wharton.
Well, this is one of my nonfictions, A Marriage at Sea by Sophie Elmhurst. This book, I cannot stop thinking about this book. In 1972, this couple decided to sell their home and get on a sailboat and sail from England to New Zealand. And as one reviewer wrote that I saw today when I was reminding myself about this book, everything that happens in Moby Dick, but in real life, is what they said about this book. So they're sailing along and a whale comes up and breaches and smashes down and smashes their sailboat in half. So then they spend 4 months at sea on a dinghy and a raft that they've tied together. This is a true story. And the wife cannot swim. That part, I just could not. It was such a butt clencher to me the whole time I read this book. It's harrowing. They end up surviving on like raw turtle. There's shark action. It's so well written. Sophie Elmhurst does just a great job researching and writing this story. It's very short. I think it was in Obama's top 10 of the summer.
It's been everywhere. Yeah, no, it's very well received. Yeah.
And they survive. I mean, spoiler alert, they survive. And then they decide to do it again. Not the dinghy part and all that. Get a sailboat and go back out to sea. So, just really fascinating book. As someone who spends a lot of time on the water, it gave me a lot to think about, and also left me with the thought that if you are going to sail around the world with someone, be very careful about who you choose to partner with.
And learn how to swim.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's not
yeah.
like that would have helped her. They're in the middle of the ocean. Like, where is she going to swim to?
Yeah, but at least if she fell overboard or,
I mean,
or
I just thought,
something.
like, would she even be able to get back on? Like, you panic and
Yeah.
stuff, Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I know like the sailors in the 19th century used to say like learning, like they didn't learn how to swim intentionally because it's like it's better that you die fast.
I mean, I guess. Yeah.
That's such an up note, Chris. Thanks for that. We're keeping with the theme here today.
Hey, just being practical.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so the next book on my list is a book that is the reason why you have bookish friends. Sometimes your bookish friends will recommend a book to you and say, "This book is for you. Why haven't you read it yet?" And it will blow your mind. It was someone's birthday in our little book chat that we have going on, Emily and all of our people from our book club. And Emily said, "Russell, have you read The Correspondent by Virginia Evans?" And I was like, "No, I've never heard of it. Emily, what are you talking about?" And it's about an old woman. And she said, "Russell, you need to read the book." And I was like, "Okay." We'll talk a little bit about this when we do our Biblio Adventure. But On My Way Home is one of the Powells in Portland. So I pre ordered the book. Well, I didn't pre order, I ordered the book. I stopped on a Friday night, picked it up, and I was like, Emily in the group, they told me to read this book. And I read it on Saturday. I read it in one day, and it again made me bawl my eyes out. But The Correspondent is the story of Sybil. She's a woman who has written letters for her entire life. This is an epistolary novel, so it's told in letters. She was a lawyer. She worked for a judge for a long time. She's just so complicated. I don't want to say anything because what I loved about this book is I knew nothing. So every page to me was meeting Sybil and the things that she had to go through in her life. And there are some choices she made that she now regrets. And she gets a letter one day from someone saying, "I know what you did," or "I know who you were." And that opens up a different set of her past. And it's about her relationship with just so many. There are letters between her and Joan Didion that are just so pitch perfect. Like they're just so good. She is just so dynamic. I just kept thinking Maggie Smith. Like that's what I saw sitting at a desk. This is very Chris, pulling out a pen, taking her paper out, and handwriting those letters, and I can just see all of that. And I just loved it so very, very much. So thank you, Emily. Thank you to my bi-coastal bibliophile book friends for telling me to read it. I absolutely loved it. So it wound up number 2 on my list.
It's such a Russell book. I'm so glad you liked it and got it and read it in a day. It's the perfect book to sit and read in a day.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. I'm kind of
It's a
waiting.
really good book. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just as some people are saying, it's a perfect book for this time. Just really.
And if you follow her story, like Virginia Evans didn't ever think that this book would be published.
Yeah.
It was turned down. She was going to give up writing, and now it's like a international bestseller. And
yeah, her story is a great story. It's a really great success story.
Nice.
It makes me wonder if they'll publish some of her back stuff that she tried to get published. She has like 8 books that she couldn't get published. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
Was that your last one, Russell?
I have one more.
Because he has 11.
I did have 11.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't sneak them all in like a paragraph.
Chris
like
had
some
20.
people did.
Well, I only have one index card left, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah, because you did your 20, sneaking them in between.
Next year, I commit to only doing 10. Yeah.
I think next year we try to really make it difficult and say it's 5 each, and then that will really stress each other out.
Never.
So what are you wrapping up with?
Hi, everyone. Before we bring it home and get to our final top books of the year, we want to remind you that we have a poll to find out about your top 10 reads of the year. It's a Google poll. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is enter your name and then the book and the author's name. So the title of the book, the author name. We'd love to get your top 10s. So head to bookcougars.com, episode 251 show notes, and right at the top of the show notes is a link to the Google form for you to fill out. If all of that feels too complicated, open up your email, send us an email to bookcougars@gmail.com and just list your 10 books. And I'm happy to add your books to the form. We're going to keep the Google form open until January 15th so that we have time to tabulate the results before the next episode. Thank you so much. Back to our top 10s.
I'm wrapping up with a fun book, and it was one that I never put it on Goodreads for some reason, and I had read it as an ebook, so it was like out of sight, out of mind, and I knew that I didn't put some books on Goodreads. I wasn't doing a good job with my reading journal. I have like 3 of them, and they're all like, who knows where they are. So I went through our episodes. Thankfully, Emily does a great job of writing the show notes, and I went and I looked through and I saw Lucy Undying, a Dracula novel by Kirsten White. I was like, oh my God, I love that book. It was such a fun read. The subtitle is a Dracula novel, so it is using the characters from Bram Stoker's Dracula. And the Lucy of the title, Lucy Westenra is Dracula's first victim in England when he gets over there. So it's kind of her story, and then a woman named Iris Goldaming, I can never pronounce that name correctly, from America, who is trying to escape her family. They're uber wealthy, uber secretive business, and she does not want to be involved in it. So she's off to England and runs into this wonderful woman. Iris is in this ancient family home that they have there, looking through things, and she finds a journal that was kept by Lucy Westenra. And so she's reading this diary, falling in love with the writer of the diary. As I said, she ran into this other woman, and it's a vampire story. It's a vampire love story that is just fantastic. And I thought the author did a great job of taking some of these characters from the original story and reimagining them. And so this story, it has 3 different timelines. There's the Lucy that Dracula kills. Then there's another Lucy's therapy notes from her therapist. And then there's Iris's story. And it's just such a fun read. I loved it. I really did. Looking at the reviews on Goodreads, a lot of people were like, oh, you killed Bram Stoker, you killed my guy. And it's just like, no. Another reviewer is like, if you love Dracula to the point where you are such a purist, this is definitely not for you. Like, just go and reread Dracula, if you can't take this. It had some really great professional reviews, though. And as one reviewer said, it's for Bram Stoker fans who believe Lucy deserved better. And I like that a lot. Because Lucy is such a, she's such a blonde, non-solid character in Dracula, as opposed to Mina Harker, So it was really cool to see Lucy in action in a different novel.
Lucy gets her due.
Yes. So Lucy Undying, again, by Kirsten White. So much fun.
Whoa. Well, one of the reasons we do our top 10 episode after the year ends is because we all agree that sometimes it can be the books that you read the last week of the year that end up on your top 10. This is the last book I read in 2025, and it's on my top 10. The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett. Such a lovely book. And the narrator was Mark Bramhall, and I mostly listened to it, and I would listen to anything that this man narrates. He's slightly Sam Shepard-ish. I mean, it was like, baby, just read to me. I'll listen to any story you want to tell me. And he's done a lot of them, so I will definitely be looking for him as a narrator. But this is a book that I could see where it could frustrate people because the main character makes a lot of bad decisions, and I know that can be kind of frustrating as a reader. But Annie Hartnett's very funny, and she really tied the whole story together at the end in surprising ways. So it's about PJ Halliday. He's 63 years old. He's won the lottery. He's won $1 million. This didn't happen recently. It happened years ago. And he gives a lot of money to his community, particularly for things for children. They're living in Pondville, Mass. And he's a bit of a mess. And he's a mess because he's lost a daughter. One of his children died in a tragic accident. He started drinking, lost his job, and he's had a few heart attacks. And he's still really good friends with his ex-wife. Their marriage fell apart due to his behavior and the loss of their child. And he goes down and has breakfast with his ex-wife down the street every day and her partner. And at the beginning of the story, her partner asks PJ for his ex-wife's hand in marriage. And they're going off on a trip. They're going off to Alaska. So he, the same day, reads an article with an obituary that the husband of his old high school flame has passed away. So she's now a widow. And she's living in Arizona at the Tender Hearts Retirement Community. So PJ decides to go on a road trip. And so it becomes a road trip novel. And there are characters in the car with him. I'm not going to spoil how they come to be in the car with him. But PJ just makes bad decisions over and over and over. And it's sometimes funny and sometimes annoying. But overall, the story was so lovely. I enjoyed it so much, and I enjoyed the characters. And it surprised me. And Annie Hartnett's written other novels, and I'm definitely going to pick them up. I think this might be her third novel. So it was a great end to my reading year. The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett, narrated by Mark Bramhall.
Emily, so many books on your list this year. I'm going like, oh gosh, I need to pick that one up, and I need to.
That's what's so fun about this.
I know. My last book is, and probably the best book I read this year, is Audition by Katie Kitamura. This is out from Riverhead. It came out this year. It was also shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. And if you haven't read Katie Kitamura before, I would say she takes things and she just flips stuff on their heads in such surprising, intellectual, fascinating ways. But this book is it's about an older woman. If you don't think there's a theme in my life, it's about an older woman. She's she's like a medium famous actress who is currently in rehearsals of a play. It's not going well. And she walks into the theater, and a young man walks up and introduces himself, asks to take her to lunch. And at lunch says, I think I'm your son. I think that I'm the son that you had years ago. Now, she thought that child died. So she says, well, there's no way you can be my son. And he goes, I'm pretty sure I'm your son. He gets a job at the theater, and all of a sudden their lives become very intertwined. And it becomes very, very complicated. She's married, and her husband doesn't know what to do with this. There's a lot of people that think that she's hanging out with a younger man. Is she cheating on her husband? Not really knowing everything. Then the second half of the book starts, and everything is thrown on its head, and the whole story changes. And I'm not going to say anything because I want you all to experience what she does when she just changes one fact. She just changes one fact about this story, and it changes everything about these people. If you haven't read her last book, A Separation, that was about The Hague. That was also very, 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 very good. But she is, I think, one of the best writers writing now, and she just does stuff that you will never, ever expect. And then you're like, okay, I didn't think I was smart enough for this. And it's so good. So there, that's my number one book of 2025.
Wait, was the one about The Hague, was she an interpreter? Or am I getting... Oh, okay. I read that. Okay.
Yeah.
So she's accessible, because for some reason when I was reading about Audition, I thought it was not like accessible.
Her first book was, to me, the hardest to read, but the least accessible. I think they've gotten more accessible as she's written more novels. But yeah.
Wonderful. What great list of books, y'all. And we should have said this at the beginning, but I think people know this now. We put everything in the show notes down below. I should have said that at the very beginning, but with links to bookshop.org so you can read more about them and decide if you want to read them. Russell, can I ask one more question about that last book? Did you listen to it on audio?
I did. I did. It's great.
Okay.
It's fantastic. Yeah. As you know, Emily, I actually listen to every book I read on audio nowadays. I have found as the older I got, there's so much going on in the world that if I don't, it's very easy for me to get distracted. So I have turned that into my life. I listen to the audio while I read. It's very, very rare. It has to be a book that hasn't come out yet for me to not listen to the audio.
You literally read as you're listening.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do that a
Yeah.
little bit. It's hard sometimes for me to find the right speed.
Mm.
Yeah, I speed it up because I
Hmm.
read faster than they usually
Yeah.
talk. And then I find eventually my brain just lets it happen. So
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love it.
So,
So
Russell, do you listen to audiobooks when you drive? Like, how do
I
you mainly
do,
consume them?
I always have a book for the car. So it is a separate book usually. And then I listen to the audiobooks. Like I read Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, and at night. That's usually when I read. And I'll put my earphones in and I'll just sit down with my book. So
So smart to tune the world out. There's so much distraction. And putting your phone in another room, that's been one of the big things
yeah,
for me if I really want to
I need
read.
to do that more in
Yeah.
2026.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we talk about some Biblio Adventures? Russell
Yes.
had a big one just because he moved to like the town that has the best bookstores in the world.
Yeah, I don't really have a Biblio Adventure just because there was just no time. But I will say, moving to Portland and finding out that there were three Powells within driving distance of my house was life-changing. Each of them very, very different. One is in Beaverton, which is extremely suburban and filled with more houses than I've ever seen in a small space. But it's just an escape for the people of suburbia. It's huge. You walk in, there's the famous Powell's in downtown, which is an entire city block, which they've rearranged, by the way, which when you thought you knew where you were and you go and then you're lost and you can't get out, which is perfectly okay with me. And then there's one on Hawthorne, which is like a little bit more bohemian, a little bit more earthy and packed all the time. Like there's just people in every aisle, a little smaller. But I've spent a lot of time finding very different books at all three locations because three very different staffs work three different bookstores. So they recommend three very different kinds of books. And I found things there that I've loved in each of them. I just keep buying books at
Yeah,
Powell's
yeah,
more
that's
and more.
pretty
That's
lucky.
great.
I like
Yeah.
I like the Hawthorne one. It's near my cousin's house, and I went to an event there, and I really like it. It's more a little bit more intimate. The big Powell's,
Mhm.
the city block Powell's, I enjoy, but I find it overwhelming unless I'm looking for something.
Yeah,
Hmm.
100%.
And I haven't been to Beaverton. That's where Nike is, so I know
Yes.
where I
Yeah.
know of Beaverton, but I've never
Yeah.
really spent time there.
So, Emily, I probably live 15 minutes north of your cousin then.
Ah,
I live in
okay.
Nice.
Alberta Arts, right up
Okay.
north of Hawthorne. So,
Yeah,
Nice.
such a cool neighborhood. So what about you, Chris?
Well, it was a really good year for Biblio Adventures, and it was kind of hard to narrow it down to one, but I did. It was the trip that I took with Colleen. So Colleen's in Chicago, I'm in Connecticut. We met in Omaha, Nebraska, and drove down to the Eisenhower Museum and Library, the presidential library, and his boyhood home. And then we headed over to Red Cloud, Nebraska for the Willa Cather Conference, their annual conference, which was kind of like the main purpose of the trip. That was lovely. I hadn't been to Red Cloud in several years, so that was a lot of fun. And I got to stay in the new remodeled hotel now, a boutique hotel that they have that just, kitty corner from the foundation, which is great. And then we drove around Red Cloud and a lot of scenes that are set in different Cather novels further out in the countryside and ended up back up in Omaha for the night. And it was a lovely trip. I think it was like 5 or 6 days. I don't really remember how long it was, but just so much fun to just be out in the world, driving around, stopping and seeing things that are interesting, like Pony Express stations and things like that.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, I highly recommend the Eisenhower Museum and Presidential Library. It's a great museum. And his boyhood home is interesting too. They give a tour of that.
Well, this might be where I do a little cheating because I was hedging my bets on some of the books. So one of my favorite Biblio Adventures was Virginia Evans in conversation with Mel Rosenthal through R.J. Julia Booksellers here in Madison. She's the writer of The Correspondent, and it was really fun to hear her story of how she came to write that novel. And I also ran into two of our listeners, Pat and Linda, there, which made it really extra special. And the owner of the store, Roxanne Cody, also introduced Virginia in a really beautiful way and just talked about how sometimes there are these breakout books that, nowadays it seems like a book has to be, a Reese book or a Jenna book or something like that to really make it. And this one was really a word of mouth, just how you came to it, Russell. A word of mouth novel that's now in like its 13th printing, and a book, as you said, that Virginia never thought would see the light of day. She was about to apply to law school because she'd been writing for 20 years with no success, or success is a tough word. It hadn't been published. And then I'm surprised that neither of you noticed that I didn't mention a cookbook in my top 10 this year. So it just so happens that one of my favorite Biblio adventures was Dory Greenspan in conversation with Casey Elsass, also hosted by R.J. Julias. And Dory was there with her new cookbook, Anytime Cakes. And Casey has a cookbook out called What Can I Bring? Recipes to Help You Live Your Best Guest Life, also published last year. And he's this young guy living in Brooklyn and enamored of Dory Greenspan, who has, been doing this for years and years and years. And he asked such good questions. It was such a compelling conversation. And I actually spent a lot of time with Dory's Cookies cookbook, which was published in 2016 this year. But she was there with her new cookbook, Anytime Cakes. So those were two top-notch ones for me. And then one that I did with Chris was Everything Isabella Stewart Gardner, which you did mention Chasing Beauty already. We read that biography of Isabella Stewart Gardner. We hosted the author Natalie Dykstra in an author spotlight. And we went to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, where I had one of the best things I ate this year as well, which I wrote about over on Ingredient One, because they have a great cafe in the museum. And I did want to do a shout out to, also on Chasing Beauty, the audiobook narrator was Maggie Meg Reed, and she really made the biography come alive for me, I feel like, in her narration. And that's one of my big takeaways for this year is, I was really surprised as I was going through all of my books, how many audiobooks I listened to and how it really does enhance the experience of reading the books.
I think we forget as adults how much we like to be read to as children. And audiobooks allow us to be read to as adults, without the judgment of like, oh, I'm being read to. That's, I think it fills a void that we didn't have before. I mean, we all read when there weren't audiobooks and, I just think audiobooks are so wonderful. I love to hear the words out loud and just sometimes it changes everything. So,
yeah. Mic drop. Well said. This is amazing.
Yeah. I did want to just say last year, I think we talked about a book we were excited was coming out this year. And I just wanted to toss out that Emily and I have a Booktopia author, Tiari Jones, that has her new book, Kin, coming out in March. And it's one of my I'm trying to hold off till closer to when it comes out so that I don't ruin it. But everyone should read it because she's amazing.
She is. When we saw her, she was there with her book Silver Sparrow.
Yes.
This was way before the big hit of American Marriage, right?
Yeah.
American Marriage, right? Yeah.
Yes. She won the Women's Prize for the American Marriage.
Yeah.
I saw her actually in the Bay Area for that book. I've seen her twice now, and I'm really excited to see what she does next.
Yeah, I started reading Kin, I think, in November, and then I was like, nope. Same thing. Like I want to really read it sooner and later. Yeah.
I just got an ARC and it doesn't come out until July, and I was like, that's too far away. There's no way. People are going to forget that I read it if I read it now.
Is there anything you're looking forward to, Chris?
Yes. Jung Young's book, which I know, Emily, you've already read.
Yeah.
I have that on my e-reader ready to go. That book comes out March 10th. All the World Can Hold. I'm really looking forward to that and waiting. I don't know when I'll read that. And then Patricia Cornwell has a memoir coming out this year. They just did the cover reveal on that. So I'm curious about that because I know some of her backstory from, articles I've read. So I'm really curious.
Do you all remember Kathleen Rooney, who
Oh
wrote
gosh,
Lily and
yes.
Boxfish?
Hmm.
She has a new book coming out in July. That's the one I was just telling you about a man who gets like lost in the ocean.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's called Man
overboard. Man
Overboard.
overboard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. We just got our arcs for that. I'm looking
yeah.
forward to that one too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm really
She's
excited about Claire Fuller's Hunger and Thirst because I
Yes.
love Claire Fuller.
That's coming from Tin House, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really good books coming out this year, y'all. I'm just worried that 2026 top 10 is going to be very hard.
We're already worried. It's the first week of January. We're
You know,
fretting.
maybe what we could do is we could talk about 10 and then have another 10 that we put in the show notes or something. I don't know. It's so hard. It's so
Well,
hard.
I've been looking
Or
at
we just do 2 episodes, our runners up.
Yes.
our honorable mention. Well, I've been looking at the listener poll because we open up a Google form for our listeners, and they're putting things. There's only 10 spots, but then there's a comment, and they're putting things in like, "You guys cheat," and then they'll list like 3 more, and then some people are like, "This is really hard." I'm like,
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, we could be totally off the charts and do 26 in 2026. And it would be
That
like
would
a
be like
6-hour episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow. We could just say the titles,
Sure, like that would happen.
right? Well, we should probably wrap it up so Russell can have dinner and we can go to bed.
Yes,
Thank you
it was
so much.
lovely. Thank you all for having me once again. I so appreciate it. Yeah, if you're in Portland, let me know and we can hang out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you both. Have a great night, okay?
Thanks for listening to The Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.